So in the last step, what we did is we actually configured our Azure Migrate Collector appliance. So now what it will do is it will start sending the data to Azure, and we will be able to see those statistics now in Azure Migrate project. So this is the migration project. What we'll do is let's do a refresh for this project so that we can see some statistics showing up in the assessment tools section. And based on the data collected by Microsoft, you can perform an assessment. So it is still refreshing the tool. And there you go. So after the Azure Migrate project was refreshed, now you can see that there are 2 discovered servers by the Azure Migrate appliance. If you want to see, you can just click on this discovered servers, and it will show you the list of servers that it has discovered. So this is the first server it has discovered, which is web server. This is the IP address. Application has not been discovered. And there is one more section called dependencies. So this is the coolest feature of the Azure Migrate is if you want to see if there are any dependencies before you migrate. For an example, let's say if this web server is communicating with tens of servers within the internal network, and you want to identify that, then you have to install an dependency agent on that particular server. And to install this dependency agent, you will also require an Microsoft monitoring agent also to install on that machine. And that data has been sent to your OMS workspace on Azure. Okay. And it also says us that this virtual machine is running with 1 core processor and 2 GB of RAM. And there's one disk of 50 GB. It has Windows Server 2012 R2 operating system running. Okay. So this is the data which Microsoft has collected from the Azure Migrate appliance. I'll go back to my Azure Migrate project. So this is the first step that is already completed. Now let's do an assessment. Okay, so let's click on Assess. And in the assessment, it is asking us to enter the assessment name. So I would say my first assessment. And then we have to configure these assessment properties. So if I click on View All, a lot of people don't understand the meaning of assessment. So assessment means to analyze the infrastructure before we actually migrate it. So it is equivalent to purchasing any two-wheeler bike before we actually, it is actually performing an assessment, like performing an analysis. So before I want to purchase any bike, I will go to 4 different showrooms to see what are the different bikes that I can afford, what are the technical specifications, and so on. Assessment is not actually migrating. Okay, it is just to analyze the data points. So it is asking us, what is your preferred location where you would like to migrate this virtual machines? So selecting East to S2 doesn't mean that you will be migrating it to East to S2. It is just to provide you with the cost for that specific region. So I would like to migrate this virtual machine to West Europe. So I would select West Europe as my target location. Now it is asking us, what are the storage types you are interested in? So are you interested in premium managed disk, standard HDD managed disk, and standard SSD managed disk? And one more point to note here is Azure Migrate does not support unmanaged disk yet. So if you want to migrate any server from on-prem to Azure using Azure Migrate, it will be created with managed disk and not with unmanaged disk. So in this specific option, I would select automatic. I will let Azure decide the cost based on the data it has collected. And it is
Sir, one
asking us,
question here.
yes.
Yeah, in ASR model, we have to create subscription, storage account, VNet, and uh, those things we need to create. So
Right.
here we don't we didn't get any option to create storage account. Instead, we have to select the disk type.
No,
Premier.
no, no. So again, you are confusing the same definition of assessment. Doing assessment does not mean you're migrating. Here we are just telling Azure that These are the properties that I am looking at after I migrate it to Azure. So please give me the assessment report based on the options that I've selected. We are not yet in the migration step. We are just performing an assessment. Assessment means analyzing. Did you got?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So now it is asking us whether you want an assessment based on any reserved instances. So we don't have any reserved instances, so I'll say no reserved instance. Then if you scroll down, you can perform an assessment based on two criterias. Okay. One is performance based and the other one is as on premises. Now, what is the difference between these two? So if you go with as on premises, what Microsoft would do is Microsoft will give you an assessment report based on the configuration that you have on premises. So let's say if you have that web server running with 1 core processor and 2 GB RAM, this assessment report would also show up that 1 core processor and 2 GB RAM, and it will give you an equivalent cost of that server in Azure. But if you go ahead with performance based criteria, what it will do is Microsoft has already collected a lot of metadata of our server. So it has collected a metadata of our hardware configuration, the performance data. So what it will do is it will analyze those those performance data, and it would come up with a recommendation stating that uh, this is what the configuration is running on premises. But if you want to run the server in Azure, you have to go with a different configuration. Okay. So sometimes what happens is in on premises, we assign a lot of resources to a machine, but those resources are not utilized. So let's say you have an on-prem server which is running with 4 core processor and 16 GB RAM. But in actual, those many resources are not being utilized. So let's say only 2 GB RAM is utilized out of 16 GB RAM, and only 1 core processor is utilized out of 4 core. So it is illogical to create the equivalent configuration on Azure, because since that configuration has not been utilized, you're paying for that. So what Microsoft would recommend you is this is the on-premises configuration, which is 4 core processor and 16 GB RAM. But based on the performance data I have collected, if you want to create this virtual machine on Azure, you should be going ahead with only 1 core processor and 4 GB RAM. So that is what a performance-based assessment is. So this assessment will also tell you what will be the cost of service when you will be migrated to Azure. So I'll go with the performance-based assessment, and here it will ask you, so how many data points you would like me to analyze? Okay, so it is always recommended that you should be performing an assessment based on a 24 hours of data. Okay, but to have an accurate assessment report, we always go with the weeks data, and you can also go with the months data as well. So in our case, we'll go with the 1 day data. It is now asking us percentile utilization. So it is asking us how much percent of the data should be analyzed to come up with an assessment. So you could go with the 95% of data, 99% of data, or you could also say that go analyze the 50% of the data and give me the assessment report. So I'll go with the 95th. In the VM series, it is asking us what are the VM SKUs that you would like to create on Azure. So in this case, I would say select all and give me the assessment report based on all the SKUs. So I'll select all, and comfort factor. So what is comfort factor? Comfort factor is a term which we used to use in the past, known as taxation. Okay, so comfort factor will actually tell you that what type of configuration you're looking on Azure. So let's say you have an on-premises machine with a configuration called 1 core processor and 2 GB RAM. So comfort factor, if you set it to 1, what Azure will do is Azure will come up with the equivalent configuration on Azure itself, like 1 core processor and 2 GB RAM. But if you set this comfort factor to from 1 to 1.5x, what it will do is it will multiply your existing configuration with 1.5. So wherein you have 2 GB RAM, that will become 3 GB on Azure, and one core processor will become 1.5 core processor on Azure. So that's what an comfort factor is. And it is up to everyone that what comfort factor they're looking at. I always go with 1.5x comfort factor so that the configuration which is in on-premises should get multiplied by 1.5 times. That means Azure should add 50% more resources to the existing infrastructure before it gets migrated to Azure. Then if you scroll down, it is asking us what is the pricing that your subscription is your subscription has. So whether you want me to calculate the cost based on the pay-as-you-go model or enterprise agreement model or what type of model, what should be the currency, what should be the discount that I should be applying on the assessment, and what is the uptime, what is the VM uptime that I should consider to calculate the cost. So it is 31 hours, sorry, it's 31 days, 24 hours per day. And finally, you have to click on save, which will create an assessment report for us. Okay, so it has not yet created, but we have simply selected the assessment properties. Now let's go ahead and create a group. Now it is a group. Group basically helps us to combine multiple virtual machines into a group so that these machines are migrated uh, parallelly to the Azure. So where you would find the importance of group. So groups are very important when you're migrating workloads which have dependency on each other. So for an example, let's say there is a web server which you want to migrate, but that web server has a dependency on a SQL database. So what you could do is you could create a group and you can add web server as well as SQL server inside the same group so that when the actual migration would happen, this both the servers would get migrated at the same time. That is where the group would come into picture. Okay. So in this case, you would create a group, or you can also simply just select the virtual machines for which you want the assessment report. So I'll select both of this virtual machine and click on create assessment. So let's create a group here. I'd say my test group, and then I will click on create assessment. So now what Microsoft will do is based on the data collected by Microsoft from our on-premises infrastructure, it will come up with the assessment report, which will have the details of everything. So it takes some time to prepare that assessment report. And once this assessment report is created, we can see that here. Okay, so just let's give few minutes, and once the assessment report is created, you will see that assessment report figure to be populated here. Let's do a refresh and see whether it has any assessment now. Meanwhile, this assessment is getting created. Let me show you some of the assessment from a different project. So I'll navigate to a different project, click on OK. And here you can find there are 3 assessment reports. I'll click on this 3 assessment reports. And there are 3 different assessment reports based on the criteria. One is the performance based, other one are the on-prem. So I'll click on this assessment report. So once this assessment report is created by Azure, there are 2 tabs here. One is Azure Readiness and the other one is cost details. Azure Readiness would tell whether that server is ready to be migrated to Azure, because sometimes what happens, there are some servers which cannot be migrated to Azure due to some n number of reasons, or there could be some challenges. So here in the Azure Readiness report, it will tell you whether that particular server can be migrated to Azure or not. So here in this case, you can see this is the server, and this server is not our existing server. These are the different servers that I had created yesterday for one of my demo. So this is the server. It says Azure VM readiness is green. That means the server can be migrated to Azure. And when the server would be migrated to Azure, you can go with this size is what Microsoft is telling us. So it is basically recommending us that if you want to migrate this server to Azure, you should be picking up this particular series. And what is the operating system it is running with? It is running with Windows Server 2012 R2. It has one disk which is in on-premises, and the size of that disk is 40 GB. And if you click on cost details, it can also give you the cost details as well. It is telling us that if you want to migrate this server to Azure, this would be your total cost. 63 USD would be your compute cost, and 3 USD will be your storage cost. Okay, so this is what an assessment report tells us, whether you can migrate those servers to Azure or not. If yes, what will be the cost of those servers on Azure? And if you want, you can also export this assessment report. Uh, and this assessment report can be read in Excel. Okay, so let me show you one of the assessment report which I already have. Okay, so I don't think I have. Let's let's copy this assessment report. So let's click on save. Because I don't have Excel in this virtual machine, that's why we won't be able to read that file. And this is how an assessment report would look like. Okay, here you'll have the details of your project, when that assessment was created, how many machines were assessed. So let's say if your infrastructure had thousands of machines that were discovered by my Azure, here there would be 1,000 number in the Excel, and it would give you how many virtual machines can be migrated to Azure. So machines ready for Azure would come up here. Machines which are not ready for Azure would come up here, and machines ready with conditions. So there could be some servers wherein it may be ready for the migration to Azure, but with some challenges. So those will be shown up here. And here is the nice graphical representation of the data. So it says that 100% of the virtual machines can be migrated to Azure. This is the monthly total cost. So 95% of your cost will be incurred by your compute, and 5% of your cost will be incurred by your storage. And here 100%, this is the storage monthly cost based on the type of storage. So in this particular assessment report, Microsoft has suggested me to go with the standard hard disk rather than going with premium SSDs or standard SSDs. And this is what it is telling. And these are the all assessed machines. Means what are the machines it has assessed. So this is the assessment. And these are the disks which it has assessed. And finally, assessment properties. Okay. So any questions in this assessment report, Bala?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, tell me.
So while migrating, we need to first assess the virtual machines.
Yeah, that's the first step that everyone does. Will you
Okay.
be ever go ahead and buy any random bike without doing your analysis?
No.
So that is what the case is with the migration. You cannot perform any migration without first analyzing whether we can really migrate that particular server to Azure or not. No one simply goes and buys a property in any city. Okay, they will first do a lot of research on what are the different properties that are available in a city, what are different builders who are building these properties, what is the cost of the property, whether I can really afford that property. And after doing a lot of analysis, then we will come to the conclusion that yes, I will be able to buy this property out of this 10 properties. This is what your analysis will give. The same thing happens in case of migration as well. No one does migration blindly without doing an assessment.
Yes, sir. And in Hyper-V, that is the appliance. So we can select virtual machines from Hyper-V. Like we can select Hyper-V host type, Hyper-V host clusters and HA clusters and DRS clusters, all those things. We can
Yes,
select it, right? Yeah.
yes, we can do that.
So, sir, one more question, some real-time question. Like we are doing this practical and this testing. So, in real time, while migrating to Hyper-V environment to Azure, So in real time, the data centers administrator, what type of issues they will face, like any port related issues, or any other particular ports we need to open from on-premises to Azure. How is that?
Exactly. So when you will be setting up this in the real world, okay, so not much issues that you would come across. There are the issues that you might come across will be around the configuration. So number one is when you'll be configuring your appliance, okay, that appliance requires an internet connectivity. So that is challenge number one. Challenge number two is since your traffic would go over the internet, your appliance should have internet and certain ports open. So all the port requirement has been already given on the Azure Migrate documentation page. So this is the only stuff that you have to configure for your appliance, because there is no much moving part for your appliance. You just have to install that appliance and that appliance will start the discovery.
Yes. Okay.
Okay,
You got it, sir. Yeah.
so let's get back to our project and we'll change the project first. We'll change the project to our current one. And now this project would have also created an assessment for us. You can see here, it has created one assessment. I'll click on that assessment. And if I click on this assessment, let's go to the Azure Readiness. And you can see here that for one server, it has says that it is ready to be migrated to Azure. But on the second one, it says ready with conditions. And why so? It says it is unable to detect the OS. Okay. So you can go through the documentation. Getting my point? What assessment tells us?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In the cost also, it will give you cost based on the configuration. So it is telling us that if you want to migrate web server to Azure, the total cost would be somewhere around 68 USD, including compute and storage. And same thing for the AZ appliance, the same. So now the assessment is complete. Let's go back now. Let's go back to overview. Let's go to Azure Migrate Server. So you can see here now in the assessment, we are done with the discovery. We are done with the assessment. Now it's important. Now it's the actual time to migrate the server. So this is the assessment data. Now we'll jump on to the migration. So in the migration also, the first step is to discover. Okay. So when I click on discover, it will ask me, are your machines virtualized? So I would say yes with Hyper-V. What is your target region? Now, the configurations that we are doing is the actual configuration which is related to the migration. Okay. So what is your target region? I want to migrate it to West Europe. So I'll select West Europe. Okay. Let's confirm this region and let's click on create resource. So when you say create resources, what it does is in the backend, it creates a key vault and it stores a lot of information about this migration project into the key vault secrets. Okay, I'll show you that in a moment. So let me go to my subscription. And if I go to key vault, so let's click on key vault. So you can see here that it is creating a key vault with name AZ appliance. Okay, this is the key vault which it created yesterday. I'll go to that yesterday's key vault. And if I go to secrets, you'll see a lot of information that it stores into the secrets of key vault, like the port number, the project name. So you can see there's a project collector name. If you show this, so this is the project collector name it has created. What is the proxy username? So there's no proxy username. Uh, Proxy IP address is not there. Let's see something else. Let's load more. Site location. So if you show secret value, this is the site location, North Europe. What is the subscription ID? So this is the subscription ID where the migration would happen. What is the subscription name? So this is the subscription name. So It creates a key vault in the backend with a lot of secrets. Okay. Now it has created. Now it is asking us to prepare your Hyper-V host. Now this is the actual binaries that we have to install on our Hyper-V host, which will help us to replicate the data from our on-prem Hyper-V host to Azure. Okay, and this has to be installed on our Hyper-V host. So I'll click on download. I'm already on my Hyper-V host. So I'll click on download and which will download this. So now you have to click here, download. Let's click on save. So once you download your Hyper-V replication provider, okay, so that is called as Hyper-V replication provider, which you have to install on the Hyper-V host. And for the registration of that Hyper-V replication provider with the Azure Migrate project, you need a registration key. Okay, and we have already downloaded the registration key as well. So let me go to my downloads section now, and this is the site recovery provider. So I'll install that on my Hyper-V host. So it's asking us to update. Let's not do that now. Next, it is asking me the installation location for this provider. Let's go with the default one. Okay, so it says that the recovery Azure Site Recovery provider is installed. Let's go for the registration now. Let's click on register, and it will ask us to provide us the key file. So that key file has already been downloaded in the downloads. This is the key file, and it will give us the details of our project. Let's click on next. It is now asking us how are you connected to the internet? Are you connected to the internet without a proxy server or with a proxy server? So right now we are not connected without a proxy server. With a proxy server. So let's go with the without a proxy server. Let's click on next. It is now checking the connectivity to the internet and creating some certificates and so on in our certificate store. So let's wait until this installation gets completed. All right. So it says now the server was successfully registered with the Azure Site Recovery Vault. So though we are using Azure Migrate project, you see a reference of Azure Site Recovery at a lot of different places because Azure Migrate is still using a lot of binaries of Azure Site Recovery. So let's click on Finish. And now let's get back to our Azure Migrate project. And here we'll have to again go back and do a refresh. So once you click on refresh, it will refresh the project and it will start listing our Hyper-V host now in this migration tool. So let's click on discover again. Let's wait for this refresh to complete. And now if you scroll down, you can see it has performed a discovery of 2 machines. Okay, but let's not go here. Let's click on discover itself. And let's do the same thing. So it is asking us, are your virtual machines virtualized? Yes, with Hyper-V. Or since we have already done this, the step number 1 is already done this. We have already downloaded and everything. Now the next step is to finalize the registration. Okay. So what we did is the first step was we clicked on discovered. We told Azure Migrate project that yes, my virtual machines are virtualized with Hyper-V. We have already downloaded this Hyper-V replication provider. We have already registered it with the Azure. Now it is the final step is to finalize the registration. So I'll click on finalize registration and it will now register our Hyper-V host into our Azure Migrate project. So we'll wait until this registration is completed. And once that is done, we will start replicating the data from our on-prem Hyper-V service to Azure. Okay, replicating is not equivalent to migrating. In replicating, what Azure does is it only migrates the data of our virtual machines to Azure on a storage account. So you had a question in the previous section that do we have to really create those virtual networks and the storage accounts in Azure before we actually migrate? The answer is yes, we still have to do that because storage accounts are used for storing the replicated data and virtual network will be used when we will be actually creating those machines in Azure. So those machines or those servers would get an IP address from the virtual network that you have created. So what I'll do is I'll open a duplicate tab. And since we will be migrating these machines to the West Europe region of Azure, I'll have to first create a storage account and then a virtual network as well. So I'll go there. I'll go to my virtual network. And here, create one virtual network, which will be in West Europe. So I'll click on add. And the name of my VNet would be migration VNet. My address space would be 172.16.14.0/24. My subnet would be the same, but with /25. What is the resource group? So I'll create a new resource group called Azure or AZ migration. Click on OK. And this will be in West Europe. So I'll select my West Europe region. And there we go. Click on create. And then I will need a storage account as well for the replication of the data. So I'll scroll down. Here's my storage account. So I don't have any storage account in West Europe. So I'll click on add. I'll select the same resource group, which was Azure Migrate AZ migration. The name of my storage account would be AZ migration store. Scroll down. This also needs to be created in West Europe. Let's go with the GPv2, and the replication would be LRS. Let's go with the hot one. Next, next, next. I'll go with the review and create. And let's click on create. So I'll go back to my Azure Migrate project, and it says that the registration has been finalized. So I'll close this now. And now, since the discovery phase of my migration is completed, I'll click on replicate. So when you click on replicate, it will ask us, are your machines virtualized? Tell them yes with Hyper-V. Let's click on next. It is now asking us, would you like to import all those migration settings from an assessment? So if you do so, what it will do is it will pick up the recommendations which Microsoft has given in the assessment report. You don't have to manually choose the configuration for each virtual machine that you want to migrate. So I'll choose an assessment report here. So tell them yes, apply migration settings from an Azure Migrate assessment, and it will ask you to select the group. So we had created a test group called my test group, in which we have added two virtual machines, and now it is asking us to select the assessment report. So this is the assessment report, my first assessment, and it is telling us that these are the two virtual machines which were assessed with the help of this assessment report. Would you like to migrate both of them or just one of them? So I would say I would like to migrate both of them. I'll click on next. And here we go. Here is the target settings that we have to select. It is asking us in which resource group would you like to migrate this service. So I would like to migrate this service in the AZ migration. What is the replication storage account you want to use? So I want to use this is the storage account that we just created, AZ migration store. What is the virtual network that you want to assign this virtual machines to? So this is the VNet that we created. So let's click on next. And in the compute, you can see the sizes have been automatically picked up by Azure. Okay. Now this sizes were provided by Azure in your assessment report. Okay. If you want to change, you can change. You always have an option. So instead of 2-core processor, I want to go with 4-core processor. That's fine. Okay. And these are the different configurations. So in the OS type, I will select it's a Windows operating system. And here also I'll select it's a Windows operating system. So let's click on next. In the disks also, Microsoft will automatically select the disks. So if this particular server has multiple disks, it would give you an option here. So let's say if this virtual machine has 4 disks, C drive, D drive, E drive, and F drive, you have an option to select what drives you want to migrate. Okay. In this case, you can also skip one of the drives and that data will not be replicated. So let's click on next, and then let's start on replicate. Now, when you click on replicate, that's where Azure Migrate will start replicating the data from our Hyper-V virtual machines to Azure. And in this process, your Azure Migrate appliance is not doing anything. So let me be very clear in this. Okay. So this is the appliance. This is the appliance that we had created. But this appliance is not migrating anything. This appliance was only responsible for sending the metadata to Azure. And who is performing the migration? The Hyper-V replication provider or Hyper-V. We just installed the Azure Site Recovery provider on the Hyper-V host. That is the actual appliance, or that is the actual application which is migrating the data from our Hyper-V virtual machines to Azure. Okay, so a lot of people confused whether this AZ appliance is not doing anything. So it is not doing anything at this moment. The the job of AZ appliance is already done, or the job of AZ appliance is to send the metadata to Azure. The actual migration is being performed by the Azure Site Recovery provider. Any questions, Bala?
Yes, sir.
Tell me.
Uh, really, in real time, generally we have a SCVM. So in SCVM, we configured appliance server. That is a Hyper-V appliance. So appliance. So once we create appliance, and that will be assess the virtual machines. And once we start the replication, so we are installing in this case we are installing this particular hyper that sir,
Hyper-V replication
uh,
provider, yes.
provider, yeah, provider installing. We are that is a host. We are installing in
Yes.
the host. So this host is replicating the virtual machines, whatever inside this particular host, it's migrating to the Azure. So
It's not
in real
migrating,
time we have,
it is not migrating,
yeah,
it is
it's a yeah,
replicating
it's a
now.
replicating. So
Yeah.
in real time we have a CVM server. So in SCVM, lot of host servers, clusters, and all those things. So what in that case, on which server we are going to install that provider?
So this provider has to be installed on your Hyper-V host. Okay. So let's say if your SCVMM cluster has 10 Hyper-V host, and this 10 Hyper-V host has, let's say, total 10 virtual machines on each Hyper-V host, so 100 virtual machines. So in this case, you will have to install this Azure Site Recovery provider on those 10 Hyper-V host so that it can start replicating the virtual machines which are there on that respective Hyper-V host.
Okay, in that time there will be a lot of work, I think, because we have more than 50 or 30 or maybe 100. That is the hosts are we are. So we have to install manually in 100 hosts. So in that
So
case, right? Sir?
yes, you could do this manually, or you could also automate this using silent installation.
Okay.
But yes,
Yeah. Got it.
th- this
Yeah.
this site, this site recovery provider has to be installed on your Hyper-V host.
Okay. And previous case, that is Azure Site Recovery, we have to install the Azure Site Recovery, that configuration setup in the only configuration server, and with that configuration server, we will get the client. That is a
No, no.
that is a
Wait. Let me tell you. Okay. So with the Azure Site Recovery as well, we had different types of workload. Okay. We with the Azure Site Recovery, we can also migrate Hyper-V virtual machines, VMware virtual machines, physical machines. So configuration server, again, I'm repeating once again, that configuration server is only required when you want to migrate physical servers, okay, when you want to migrate VMware virtual machines. In case of Hyper-V virtual machines, you don't need a configuration server in case of Azure Site Recovery as well.
okay, sir. In my previous office, we have, because Microsoft only maintain the Hyper-V servers. Oh, that case, we have installed configuration servers, and we migrated Hyper-V virtual machines to Azure.
No,
That case.
that was not really not, that is, in that case also that was really not required, because when you want to migrate any Hyper-V virtual machines from on-prem Hyper-V host to Azure, there is a concept of Hyper-V replication. So Microsoft uses that Hyper-V replication concept to migrate or to replicate these machines. But in case of VMware virtual machines and physical machines, Microsoft cannot use this Hyper-V replication concept, and that's where the concept of configuration server comes into picture.
That is 3 years back, sir. Actually.
No, even right now also, even if you want to even if you want to migrate Hyper-V virtual machines with the help of ASR, you can still do that, and in that case also you don't need a configuration server.
Okay. Yeah. Got it, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's do a refresh of our Azure Migrate project to see whether we get any data in the replicating servers section. Let's scroll down. And now you can see that there are two servers which are getting replicated. Okay, so I'll click on those two servers, and you should see the status here. How many percent of the data has been synchronized? So with the AZ appliance, only 3% of the data has been synchronized. Go back. And for web servers, there is no data which has been synchronized yet. Okay, the status of the servers looks healthy, and the migration has never been performed yet. Okay, so what we will do is we will wait for another 10-15 minutes so that this data has been synchronized from our Hyper-V virtual machines to Azure. And once that is done, we will perform our last step, which is to migrate the servers. Okay, so we'll connect after 10 minutes.